Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before starting the video, please hit the subscribe, now this start video. After a hiatus of over 5 years, the highly anticipated One Chicago crossover event returned in 2025, reuniting the beloved characters of Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, and Chicago PD. This time, however, the spotlight was firmly on Firehouse 51, as Chicago Fire took the lead in the 3-hour spectacle. The crossover began with Chicago Fire, seamlessly transitioning into Chicago Med and Chicago PD, but it was clear from the outset that the firefighters and paramedics of Firehouse 51 were the driving force of the narrative. While familiar faces from Chicago PD and Chicago Med played their parts, the characters from Chicago Fire dominated the screen, ensuring their presence was felt throughout the event. This shift in focus was not only inevitable given the nature of the crisis at hand, but also necessary for the evolution of the One Chicago franchise. The 2025 crossover, titled In the Trenches, centered around a catastrophic gas explosion at a city government building, a disaster that naturally required the expertise of Firehouse 51. From the moment the call came in, the firefighters and paramedics were at the forefront, battling flames, rescuing survivors, and investigating the cause of the explosion. While Chicago Med handled the medical fallout and Chicago PD worked to unravel the mystery behind the incident, it was Chicago Fire that remained the constant presence, anchoring the crossover from start to finish. This narrative structure allowed the show to reclaim its position as the heart of the One Chicago universe, a role it had somewhat relinquished in recent years. The decision to begin the crossover with Chicago Fire was a logical one, given the nature of the emergency. A gas explosion at a government building is precisely the kind of crisis that demands the immediate response of firefighters and paramedics. Firehouse 51 was the first on the scene, with every member of the team springing into action. From Chief Bowden's replacement, Dom Pascal, to the ever-determined Stella Kidd and Kelly Severide, the firefighters were tasked with extinguishing the flames, rescuing trapped civilians, and ensuring the safety of the surrounding area. This setup ensured that Chicago Fire was the natural starting point for the crossover, setting the stage for the interconnected stories that followed. The explosion also led to a secondary crisis, a train derailment caused by the blast, which trapped several characters underground, including Stella Kidd and Chicago PD's Adam Ruzek. This development further cemented Chicago Fire's central role, as the firefighters worked tirelessly to rescue their colleagues and other passengers. Meanwhile, the paramedics of Firehouse 51, including Violet Mikami, played a crucial role in tending to the wounded, bridging the gap between Chicago Fire and Chicago Med. The seamless integration of these storylines highlighted the interconnectedness of the One Chicago universe, while ensuring that Chicago Fire remained at the forefront. While some viewers might have found Chicago Fire's overwhelming presence in the crossover to be excessive, the show's prominence was both justified and necessary. For one, Chicago Fire has seen a decline in ratings in recent years, with Chicago Med surpassing it as the highest-rated series in the franchise. This shift in viewership has raised concerns about the future of the show, making it imperative for the crossover to reignite interest in Firehouse 51. By placing the firefighters and paramedics at the center of the action, the crossover provided Chicago Fire with the exposure it needed to regain its footing. Additionally, Chicago Fire has undergone significant cast changes since the last crossover in 2019. With the departure of key characters like Gabby Dawson and Otis Vonseck, as well as the introduction of new faces such as Dom Pascal and Violet Mikami, the show has had to redefine its identity. The 2025 crossover served as an opportunity to reintroduce these characters to the broader One Chicago audience, showcasing their dynamics and establishing their place within the franchise. This was particularly important for Dom Pascal, who stepped into the role of Firehouse 51's chief following Bowden's departure. Pascal's interactions with characters like Hank Voight and Dr. Steven Weber demonstrated his ability to lead not only his team, but also the larger One Chicago community. One of the standout aspects of Chicago Fire has always been the chemistry among its ensemble cast, and this was on full display during the crossover. The bond between Stella Kidd and Kelly Severide, for example, was a focal point of the narrative, with Severide's desperate attempts to rescue Kidd from the underground train underscoring the depth of their relationship. Similarly, the camaraderie among the firefighters and paramedics of Firehouse 51 was evident as they worked together to tackle the crisis. This sense of unity and teamwork not only made for compelling television, but also reinforced the idea that Chicago Fire is the emotional core of the One Chicago franchise. The crossover also provided an opportunity to explore new dynamics, particularly between the characters of Chicago Fire and the other shows. Violet Mykami's interactions with Dr. John Frost from Chicago Med, for instance, added a fresh layer to the narrative, highlighting the ways in which the different teams collaborate in times of crisis. These moments of connection served to strengthen the ties between the shows, ensuring that the crossover felt like a cohesive event rather than a collection of disjointed storylines. The 2025 crossover undeniably succeeded in re-establishing Firehouse 51 as a central force within the One Chicago universe. By placing firefighters and paramedics at the heart of the action, the event reminded viewers of their critical role in keeping the city safe. The introduction of new characters like Dom Pascal and the continued development of existing ones like Stella Kidd and Violet Mykami ensured that Chicago Fire felt fresh and relevant, even as it honored its legacy. Moreover, the crossover highlighted the unique strengths of Chicago Fire as a series. Unlike Chicago PD, which focuses on the gritty world of law enforcement, or Chicago Med, which delves into the high-stakes environment of a hospital, Chicago Fire strikes a balance between action, emotion, and camaraderie. This versatility was on full display during the crossover, as the firefighters and paramedics navigated both the physical and emotional challenges of the crisis. Whether they were battling flames, rescuing survivors, or supporting one another, the characters of Firehouse 51 demonstrated why they remain the heart of the One Chicago franchise. In many ways, the 2025 One Chicago crossover was a necessary step forward for the franchise. With Chicago Fire facing declining ratings and significant cast changes, the event provided an opportunity to reassert the show's importance within the One Chicago universe. By giving Firehouse 51 the lion's share of screen time, the crossover not only reignited interest in Chicago Fire, but also set the stage for its future. At the same time, the crossover served as a reminder of what makes the One Chicago franchise so special: the interconnectedness of its stories and characters. While Chicago Fire took the lead, the event would not have been complete without the contributions of Chicago Med and Chicago PD. From the intelligence unit's investigation into the cause of the explosion to the medical team's efforts to save lives, each show played a vital role in the narrative. This collaboration underscored the strength of the franchise as a whole, ensuring that the crossover was more than just a showcase for Chicago Fire. The 2025 One Chicago crossover also highlighted the importance of balance within the franchise. While Chicago Fire took center stage, the event ensured that Chicago Med and Chicago PD still had meaningful roles to play. Hank Voight's leadership in the intelligence unit, for example, was crucial in uncovering the truth behind the explosion, while Dr. Will Halstead and the medical team at Gaffney Chicago Medical Center worked tirelessly to save lives. This balance allowed each show to shine in its own right while contributing to the larger narrative. Furthermore, the crossover served as a reminder of the stakes involved in the work of first responders. The gas explosion and subsequent train derailment were not just plot devices. They were harrowing reminders of the dangers faced by firefighters, paramedics, police officers, and doctors every day. By grounding the event in realism, the crossover honored the real-life heroes who inspire the franchise, adding depth and gravitas to the story. In the end, the 2025 One Chicago crossover was a masterclass in storytelling, seamlessly weaving together the threads of three distinct shows into a cohesive and compelling narrative. It celebrated the strengths of the Chicago Fire while reinforcing the interconnectedness of the One Chicago universe. As fans look to the future, the crossover sets a high bar for what's to come, promising more thrilling, emotional, and impactful stories from the franchise. For Chicago Fire, this was a moment of resurgence, proving that even after more than a decade, Firehouse 51 remains the beating heart of One Chicago. The 2025 One Chicago crossover was a triumph for Chicago Fire, reaffirming its place as the cornerstone of the franchise. By placing Firehouse 51 at the center of the action, the event not only addressed the show's recent challenges, but also celebrated its enduring appeal.